大家好，欢迎收看今天的节目。在今天的节目当中呢，我们将分享的不仅仅是一首诗，更是一场历史的回响。1916年复活节，爱尔兰爆发起义，点燃了民族独立运动的火种。在这个期间呢，叶芝写下他所有作品当中最复杂、最沉痛，也是最永恒的一首诗《复活节1916》。一切都彻底改变了，一个美，可怕的美。今天我们将一起走进这首诗，走进那个理想与牺牲交织的春天。Hello, welcome to our episode today. Today we are going to talk about Yeats' poems, specifically one poem. The name of that is, let's leave it to Robert to say.
It's Easter 1916, which is, I'd say, along with the Lake Isle of Innisfree, perhaps Yeats' most famous poem. I mean, certainly a much anthologized and discussed poem.
Okay, great. Shall we get started?
Yeah, should we give it some context?
Yes.
So the poem is about the incidents of Easter 1916, which you know about a little bit. So what happened?
We talked about that.
We did. Can you remember?
You said like there were three big important things happened to Ireland.
I think there were more than three big important things happen. I think we were talking in the context of O'Casey, Sean O'Casey.
Yes.
And O'Casey wrote three great plays, and those three great plays cover three huge incidents around the beginning of the 20th century. The Easter Rising, the War of Independence,
and also the
Civil War.
Yeah.
So through three kind of wars, battles that took place. I mean, that's just O'Casey's way of writing about that early 20th century history, but certainly those things were all really important, huge events for Ireland. But the first of those, the one that kind of begins them, is the Easter Rising. And the Easter Rising took place in Dublin and other cities, but mostly in Dublin, when a number of Irish patriots, nationalists, revolutionaries, from various different parts of the Irish political spectrum, mounted a rising against the British, who were at that time fighting the First World War. And it was fairly short-lived. They took over various places in the city and defended them. And they kind of more or less knew they would be defeated on a military level. So the idea was to sort of achieve a revolutionary moment and to change perhaps the trajectory. So it was a rising for the future. They were defeated. The British sent soldiers to Ireland. They sent a gunboat up the River Liffey, famously. And then what happened was really interesting, because the British made a terrible mistake, which was having arrested, many people died. They also arrested many leaders of this uprising, and they executed them. So in a simple sense, it was the execution of the leaders of the revolution.
Lead to the...
Yeah, well, it turned the majority of the Irish population against the British. Up to that point, it was a more complicated thing.
relationship.
Yeah, so that sort of fueled the subsequent War of Independence, and it was the War of Independence that led then to the civil wars, which are very kind of hidden Irish history still. So it's the first kind of big military incident of the early 20th century. And in his poem, Yeats, we'll hear the poem, it's not an easy poem. I mean, the poem is interesting for two reasons. Firstly, it's very much the political Yeats, and the Yeats who is engaged in questions of Irish independence and war. So there's that side of Yeats. And then it's also interesting in terms of style. Around this period, Yeats was shifting from being a really romantic poet
Into a more political...
into a more modernist poet. So it's the modernism and the politics. And that means it's a harder poem to read than some Yeats. Lots of early Yeats poems, I mean, they're brilliant. They're very lyrical. They're very beautiful. They're not exactly difficult poems. This one is challenging, I think. And he's under the influence of the great modernists. I think principally Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot, those people, Virginia Woolf, and they're people who write Joyce. You know, they write in a way which is it's demanding of the reader. They're difficult.
Difficult.
Yeah. What do you want? Anything to ask about the Easter Rising, or?
May I ask a question about, for the very famous one, When You're Old? Is that piece before this one or after this one?
I think it's after The Gloss of Heaven. I haven't got that information to my brain.
But is he intentionally trying to become a more modernist writer? So he trying to kind of like change his style, or it is because of the revolution itself make him?
Good question. I don't know. I think there'd be an answer to that. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Yeats was a very conscious writer. He was very conscious of his craft. He was very conscious of his place in the world and in culture. So I'm sure he spoke about that. I guess, how does anyone change their style? They read other people's things, they're
true.
Exposed, they sense that the world is changing. The world is a different place in 1916 to the world of 1890 or whenever Yeats was sort of beginning. So I think it's a good question. I'd say a bit of both.
Generations come, generations go.
They do, and it's a rare artist who can actually shift into a completely different register. And that's part of why Yeats is a great writer, because he had this incredibly long career. And he was still writing good stuff at the end. Most artists get worse, or repeat, or run out of ideas. But he never did.
Well.